I want you to close your eyes for a second. Well, unless you're driving, in which case, please keep them on the road.
Yeah, safety first, definitely.
Right. But just for a moment, I want you to imagine a structure that is older than language.
Mm-hmm.
Older than, like, the very first symbol ever carved into stone or, spoken into the dark. It's this perfect model for cosmic architecture.
It really is an absolute marvel of engineering.
Exactly. And it's something you have probably seen, I don't know, 100 times without really thinking about it. I'm talking about the hive.
The beehive.
Yeah. And not as some cute corporate metaphor for teamwork, but as a literal blueprint for reality itself.
Right.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into a really fascinating source text titled Queen Bee of the Hive Mind. And our mission here is to sort of shortcut our way through some intensely profound philosophy.
It gets deep very quickly.
It really does.
Yeah.
Because we want to find an actual practical cure for this modern epidemic of burnout and isolation you're probably feeling. But to do that, we have to throw out basically everything we think we know about leadership.
Starting with our whole human obsession with agreement, it's a massive paradigm shift.
Yeah, tell me about that, because we usually think agreement is a good thing. Right?
Well, when we look at the biological reality of the bee colony, it really diagnoses some of the deepest spiritual and psychological crises of our time. And the first illusion we have to shatter is how we build communities.
Okay.
Human beings rely on agreement. We think it's the highest form of cooperation. But if you look closely at what agreement actually is, it's inherently based on friction.
We usually think of agreement as the opposite of friction, like everyone getting along.
On the surface, maybe, but mechanically, think about it. Agreement requires negotiation.
Right.
It requires compromise. It is literally the grinding of individual will against individual will until, something somewhat acceptable emerges.
Oh, I see. Nobody gets exactly what they want.
Exactly. You shave off a piece of your desire, I shave off a piece of mine, and we just meet in this middle ground of, mutual dissatisfaction.
Mutual dissatisfaction, that's, yeah.
But the hive doesn't do that. The hive does not operate on agreement at all. It operates on coherence.
Okay, let's ground that, because I think that's a huge distinction for the listener.
Mm-hmm.
If we're talking about agreement, imagine a group of friends arguing over where to go for dinner on a Friday night.
Oh, the worst.
Right. One person really wants sushi, another person only wants tacos, someone else is on, like, a highly specific diet. And after an hour of negotiating and group chat friction...
You finally compromise.
Yes. You end up at some mediocre diner where everyone is just mildly disappointed. That's agreement. But coherence is totally different.
Completely different.
Coherence is like watching a massive flock of starlings turning in the sky at the exact same millisecond. Nobody called a meeting. Nobody took a vote.
Yeah, or think about being on a crowded dance floor when an incredible song drops.
Yes. You don't coordinate your movements with the person next to you, but everyone just feels the frequency, right? And moves as one fluid organism.
That is the perfect way to visualize resonance, because coherence is when all things are tuned to the exact same frequency. The individual doesn't have to compromise or shave off parts of itself.
Right, you're just fully there.
You are fully yourself. You're operating at maximum capacity, but functioning seamlessly as part of the whole. The source material actually uses a brilliant term for this, distributed sovereignty.
Distributed sovereignty. I mean, that almost sounds like an oxymoron.
It kind of does, yeah.
Because sovereignty usually implies one person in charge, right? A king, a CEO, someone at the very top of a pyramid. How can everyone be sovereign without it just dissolving into absolute chaos?
That's the beauty of it. To understand distributed sovereignty, you really have to look at how esoteric traditions describe the cosmos.
Okay.
There's this Vedic concept called Indra's net. Imagine a universe constructed of an infinite net, and at every single intersection of this net, there is a jewel.
A jewel at every intersection.
Right. Now, because the net is infinite, every single jewel flawlessly reflects the light of all the other jewels. So if you try to find the center of that net, where is it?
Well, it's everywhere.
Exactly. From the outside of a hive, a human looks at it and goes, the queen is the center.
Right, she's the boss.
But from the inside of the hive, the center is everywhere simultaneously. It's in every single wax cell. It's in the body of every worker bee.
It's in the hum itself.
Yes. The intelligence is distributed across the entire network.
But hold on, if she isn't giving orders, how does anything actually get done? Like, if she isn't holding a morning meeting or barking commands or sending out a memo to the worker bees, what is her actual job?
How does she lead without managing?
Exactly. How does that work?
This brings us to the physical, chemical reality of her power, which is just entirely different from human leadership. The queen communicates through pheromones.
Okay, chemicals.
Right. But the critical distinction here is that these pheromones are not commands. She isn't secreting a chemical that says, go gather more pollen or build a new wall.
So what is she communicating?
Her pheromones are pure somatic truth-telling.
Somatic meaning body-based.
Right, body-based. She is simply secreting biological information about her own reproductive state, the colony's stress levels, and its current needs.
Oh, wow.
If the hive is starving, her chemistry radiates starvation. If it's thriving, she radiates thriving. She doesn't teach the hive how to be a hive. She just constantly, authentically radiates the reality of the present moment.
Her presence is her pedagogy.
Exactly.
That completely flips our idea of communication. Because in human culture, we fetishize explicit symbolic communication, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. We want everything spelled out.
We want the text message, the speech, the bulleted list. But the hive operates on this deep bodily knowing. It actually reminds me of how spiritual transmission works in a lot of ancient traditions.
It's very similar.
The text links this queen-bee dynamic directly to things like the Tibetan concepts of lung and wang, or Shaktipat in the Hindu tradition.
Yes, and this is where the mechanism of coherence becomes really clear. In traditions that practice Shaktipat, for example, a realized teacher doesn't just hand a student a book of rules or a philosophy to memorize.
Right.
The teacher transmits a frequency.
Let's use an analogy for that, just because it can sound a bit abstract to modern ears. Think of it like two tuning forks.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. The teacher is a tuning fork that is already vibrating at a state of profound, calm coherence. When a student who might be super stressed or scattered.
Which is most of us.
Right, exactly. When they come and sit near that teacher, their own nervous system is like a second tuning fork.
Yeah.
Just by being in physical proximity to that resonant field, the student's nervous system naturally begins to vibrate at that exact same frequency.
They sync up without a single word being spoken. That's exactly how it works. And historically, across so many ancient cultures, this specific type of generative organizing intelligence, this field-creating resonance, was viewed as profoundly feminine.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. In Minoan Crete, the high priestesses were called the Melissa, which literally translates to the bees.
Wow.
At the Ephesian temple of Artemis, they had bee priestesses, the Egyptian house of the bee. And in Vedic India, there is a goddess named Brahmari, the goddess of bees, who maintains cosmic order.
But she doesn't do it with, like a sword, right?
No, she maintains it by weaponizing the hum of 10,000 bees. It is power, undeniably, but it's a totally different paradigm of power. It's power from within, not power over.
That's a beautiful distinction.
The queen doesn't make the honey. She produces the resonant conditions in which honey becomes possible.
Okay, I have to step in here, because I'm sure you're thinking this too as a listener. This all sounds beautiful in theory, but human history is littered with charismatic leaders, cults, and dictators who claimed they were creating coherence and unity. And it usually ends incredibly badly. So how do we know this queen bee model isn't just like a biological excuse for an authoritarian cult? How do you tell the difference between a charismatic despot and an authentic leader generating a genuine field?
It is the most vital question you could ask. And biology provides a literal litmus test for this. The author boils it down to one brilliant phrase: authoritarian pheromones lie.
Authoritarian pheromones lie. Okay,
Yeah.
what does that actually look like in human terms?
Well, think about a toxic boss or a despot. They create a counterfeit hive mind. They use fear, manipulation, and manufactured crises to create the sensation of coherence, but it's entirely for their own private interest.
So it's fake coherence.
Totally fake. Their pheromones, their communication style are the 2 a.m. furious emails. It's the constant rhetoric of us versus them. They are basically pumping the organizational field full of cortisol.
Oh, wow. So they create a trauma bond that feels like unity, but is actually just shared panic?
Yes. And what happens to a system built on false coherence? It becomes incredibly brittle. It breaks under pressure, and it is entirely dependent on that single dictator to keep it moving.
So the counterfeit hive is built on exhaustion and fear.
Precisely. But an authentic queen's presence, a genuine center of coherence, does the exact opposite. Because she is telling the absolute biological truth about the state of the community, she empowers the community to thrive.
Right.
Her presence makes the whole group more vital, more adaptive, and highly intelligent. You aren't drained by a true queen, you are energized.
That is such a practical tool for navigating the world right now. Like, you can literally feel the difference in your nervous system when you are in a counterfeit hive versus an authentic one.
You really can.
So if we take this incredible biological model and scale it all the way up, I mean, way up, if a fizzleaf hive acts as one mind, what happens when we apply this blueprint to the entire planet?
Then we enter the realm of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. He was a Jesuit philosopher and paleontologist, and he developed this concept called the noosphere.
The noosphere.
Right. Just as the Earth is covered by a biosphere, the physical layer of biological life, the trees, the animals, Teilhard de Chardin proposed that the Earth is becoming enveloped by a noosphere.
Like a layer of thought.
Yes, a layer of consciousness. By studying deep time and evolution, he concluded that the universe is actively organizing matter to produce a unified field of awareness.
Toward an ultimate goal, right?
Yeah, we are evolving toward what he called the omega point, which is a state of maximum complexity and consciousness.
Basically, the universe is learning to hold more consciousness. It's actively building a planetary hive mind. And you could almost feel the physical wiring of this happening right now with the internet and our smartphones.
Oh, everywhere.
We're constantly tapped into this global nervous system. But right now, for most of us, tapping into that global nervous system doesn't feel like a beautiful state of coherence.
No, it feels overwhelming.
It feels like doom scrolling. It feels terrifying. We are more connected than ever, but people feel completely isolated sitting in their living rooms. Why does the noosphere hurt so much right now?
Because of the illusion of separation. In traditions like Vedanta, this experience of separation is called avidya, and it is considered the root of all human suffering.
Avidya.
We feel trapped inside our individual skin, completely cut off from the rest of the network. We are participating in a planetary hive, but we are perceiving ourselves as totally isolated atoms.
I hear that, but I have to be honest. This triggers a massive, deep-seated anxiety for me, and probably for you listening too.
The fear of losing yourself.
Exactly. If evolution is pulling us into a civilizational hive mind, does that mean I lose my irreplaceable singular perspective? Is the ultimate cure for our modern separation just becoming a mindless worker drone in a global collective?
Right.
Because honestly, that sounds like a dystopian nightmare. I don't want to be a cog in a machine.
It is a very natural Western fear. We have been conditioned to believe that true individuality requires being a closed, isolated system. But the mystic traditions completely reject the idea of annihilation.
So they don't want us to become drones.
Not at all. Look at Vedantic philosophy with Atman and Brahman. Or in Sufism, there's a concept called fana, which is the dissolution of the rigid self into the divine. But it is immediately followed by bhaka.
And what is bhaka?
Bhaka is existing within the divine as a fully conscious, unique presence. You don't disappear.
I like that.
The bee doesn't cease to be a bee when it enters the hive. In fact, it becomes a more complete version of itself. Outside the hive, a single bee makes no sense.
It just dies.
Exactly. Its biology has no purpose. Inside the hive, its individual actions finally have profound meaning. What this philosophy challenges us to realize is that true individuality isn't a walled fortress. True individuality is an open field.
You find your truest self when you are functioning within the coherent field of the whole.
Exactly.
You aren't losing yourself. You're finally finding the context where your self makes sense. That shifts it from a dystopian nightmare to something incredibly liberating.
It really does.
But let's bring this down from the cosmos. Let's get out of the planetary noosphere and turn this completely inward. How does this hive concept actually operate inside my own brain, on a Tuesday morning? Where does this queen live inside of us?
The contemplative traditions all agree that there is a queen within. It's that still, resonant point at the center of your consciousness.
Okay.
Meister Eckhart, the Christian mystic, called it the Seelenfünklein, the little spark of the soul. In Buddhism, it's your Buddha nature. In Jungian psychology, it's the self with a capital S.
Right.
But the most crucial psychological insight here is about what the queen is not.
Right. Your ego is not the queen.
Definitely not.
And this is where the burnout happens. Your ego is that hardworking, stressed-out, anxious field worker bee who somehow completely forgot that the queen even exists.
That's a great way to put it.
Imagine your ego as an overworked middle manager at a massive corporation. This middle manager is running around the office with a clipboard, sweating through their shirt, trying to micromanage every single department.
Sounds exhausting.
It is. They are deeply delusionally convinced that they are the CEO of your psyche. And they are burning out. You are burning out. Why? Because the middle manager is trying to generate the company's energy.
Right, they're forcing it.
They're trying to force coherence through sheer willpower, instead of just doing their specific, limited job and resting in the larger field of the organization.
That analogy perfectly captures the exhaustion of modern life. The ego cannot generate the resonant field. It's doomed to try. The entire contemplative path, whether you call it meditation, prayer, or just taking a walk in the woods without your phone, is fundamentally about letting that frantic worker bee stop working for a minute. You just stop flying. You rest in the hive, and you let the hum of the queen within remind you of who is actually running things.
Without flying, rest in the hive. That alone is worth the price of admission today.
But there's another piece to this biology that absolutely fascinated me, and it has to do with how a new queen is made.
Oh, this is incredible.
Because queens don't live forever. Eventually, the center cannot hold. What happens then? The mechanism for replacing a queen is philosophically staggering. The hive doesn't have a genetic royal family waiting in the wings. There is no bloodline of succession.
So what do?
Instead, when a new queen is needed, the collective selects a regular, ordinary worker larva, completely standard, and they begin to feed it something different.
Royal jelly.
Royal jelly. And this isn't just a metaphor, it triggers a literal epigenetic transformation.
Wait, really? It changes their DNA.
It alters the larva's DNA expression, fundamentally changing her neurological and physiological development. She becomes a queen not because she was born destined to rule, but because the collective decided to feed her differently.
Wow.
Sovereignty is literally called forth by the nourishment, attention, and devotion of the community.
Just pause and think about the human equivalent of that for a second.
Yeah.
The collective feeds sovereignty into existence. It physically changes the trajectory of a life through concentrated nourishment.
It's powerful.
It makes me want to ask you, listening to this right now, who in your life has fed you royal jelly? Who has given you the kind of profound, unbroken attention, mentorship, or belief that called forth a much larger version of yourself?
The version you didn't even know you had the genetics for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And conversely, who are you feeding royal jelly to right now? Who are you holding space for?
It's the ultimate model for true mentorship, right? An esoteric initiation. When you encounter a great mentor, they aren't just giving you a textbook of skills. They are feeding you concentrated psychological and spiritual nourishment.
They're activating something.
They're activating a capacity for coherence that you simply couldn't have unlocked in isolation.
Which brings us to the physical sensation of all of this. The text ends by focusing on the actual, literal sound of the hive.
The hum. If you've ever stood near an apiary, you know the hive hums continuously. It is a literal body song that expresses its collective state. And we see this mirrored everywhere in human spirituality. It's a return to the primordial vibration. The Hindu concept of Om is the foundational sound of reality. The Hellenistic logos, the Sufi practice of deep listening, the Sama.
The hive is always singing its own coherence.
Always.
So if you're navigating your day and you feel that modern burnout creeping in, that intense separation, that frantic middle manager energy where you're trying to control the universe with a clipboard.
Drop the clipboard.
Exactly. The invitation here is incredibly simple. Stop the frantic flying of your anxious ego worker. Become still. You don't have to create the resonant field. You just have to stop arguing with it. Let the hum locate you.
Because you are already inside the hive.
You're already in it. Which leaves us with one final, deeply provocative thought to ponder long after this deep dive ends. We talked about resting in a hive. We talked about growing new queens with royal jelly. But what happens when the old order can no longer hold?
Right.
Because biology dictates that when a new queen emerges, the old queen doesn't stay and fight her to the death. She doesn't cling to power and destroy the community in the process. She does something incredible. She leads a swarm.
She takes half the hive with her into the absolute unknown.
Exactly. She takes half the living intelligence of the community, leaves the established, comfortable structure behind, and goes out into the wild to build entirely from scratch. Meanwhile, the remaining half stays behind to reorganize around the new queen and maintain the legacy. Nothing is destroyed, but everything transforms.
It's a profound transition.
So look at the massive disruptions happening in our own civilization right now. The anxiety, the breaking of old political and social systems,
Yeah.
the feeling that everything is fracturing. What if we aren't experiencing a civilizational collapse? What if we're experiencing a civilizational swarm?
Hmm.
Think about your own life, your own work, your own community. Are you the part of the hive staying behind to reorganize the old structures, or are you lifting off to carry your coherence into the unknown?
That's a great question.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep listening for the hum, and we'll catch you next time.